my friends, and welcome back to Inside the Minds of Authors. If you have been with us all day, I'm so glad you guys are having a fabulous Saturday afternoon. We have some amazing authors, and guess what? We have another one that's going to blow your minds today. But if you're new to the show, make sure to subscribe. You do not want to miss a single episode. We're here to bring you exciting and passionate authors with incredible work. So this is the podcast you want to come and hang out. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, as well as all your favorite podcasting station. So make sure to subscribe so you do not miss a single one. Because you guys are here to figure out who is our guest for this afternoon. Let me bring out the fabulous Mr. Marc. Hello, dear. How are you?
I am excellent today. How are you?
I am wonderful. By the way, I love your voice. You have like that whole broadcasting station. I was like, you can talk to me all day long because it's amazing. So yes. Congratulations on the book. We are excited you're here to join us. And because we are interested in figuring out death at a wedding, let's bring it on. Tell us. I'm turning it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yes, my brand new book is Death at a Wedding. It's a kind of pseudo-sequel follow-up to my very first book, Death Dresses Poorly. And it is an urban fantasy, dark romantic comedy, something that I never really thought that I would get myself into. I've never really been one to think that I could write in the romance genre, but it's amazing what happens when you just start putting fingers to keyboard and you have a story to tell. And it is the story of a young man who also just happens to be the specter of death, who is invited to his sister's wedding, and he has to try and become more socially normal than he would generally be. As I'm sure you can understand, the specter of death is not great at interpersonal relationships. And yeah, it's a dark comedic take on the kind of role that death plays in our lives and how we kind of deal with them while also trying to deal with normal human situations like finding someone and falling in love.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Marc, you can start the reading.
All right, thank you. This is near the beginning, and our protagonist Ethan has just shown up. Ethan opted for a walk the short distance to his destination to mentally wash off the events from the night before, and arrived at the restaurant his sister instructed 15 minutes before he was scheduled to show up. Being death had taught him to be prompt to his meetings, and being early was consistently regarded as being superior to being late. The place was pretty generic, if he had to put a descriptor on it. Lots of wood, lights too dark to read by but too light to feel cozy, an open window to the kitchen so the patrons could see a bunch of underpaid staff fight their way through the dinner rush and try to do their best that they could with the presentation while knowing they were dangerously short on arugula. The seats around the bar were occupied as the Blackhawks played. No one was overdressed since it was a weekend, and most looked like tourists anyway. Who would want to go downtown on a Saturday night? He asked the hostess about where he should go and was guided to a separate room at the rear of the place. Inside was a collection of large tables, a private bar, and a handful of people milling around, laughing and seemingly having a good time. It was basically Ethan's hell. Arlene saw him as he entered and broke away from the conversation she was involved in at once, a big smile coming to her face. The red glow of cherry cheeks told him that she was already well into it. She had less of a predilection towards sobriety, though the drink could be found in his hand from time to time. But he still welcomed her happiness regardless of how alcohol-fueled it was. "Hey, loser," she chimed in as she hugged him. "You're early. They're still setting up." "Better early than late, sis. Besides, I wanted to say hi before the thing got started, and I won't be able to get an ounce of your time." "Oh, whatever. Like I said, you're the only family I've got here. You're at the head of the class." He rolled his eyes with genuine discomfort. "Yippee." She playfully smacked his shoulder. "Oh, whatever. Suck it up, Cupcake. You got this. I gave you an out." "No, you didn't. You said I owe you." She smiled wide once more. "Oh, yeah, I did. Well, now I'll make sure I milk every last ounce of goodwill out of you between now and July." He snorted. "Goodwill?" What a laugh. She pulled him over to a little crowd of friends she had broken away from and made some quick introductions. He had met her fiancé Matthew twice before. Arlene had hooked up with him shortly after Ethan's plane crash and subsequent job interview for death. Matthew was fine. No noticeable issues Ethan could see. Handsome enough, dressed well, kind of dry. After their shared unpleasant upbringing, finding someone who was a good person and generally inoffensive was likely the best either of these siblings could ever hope for. Hey, Ethan, thank you so much for coming, Matthews said with what appeared to be actual appreciation, and a handshake that didn't seem to be trying to one-up Ethan that Ethan returned. It means a lot to us both, really. Ethan nodded back. Hey, it's my pleasure, man, for real. Congratulations to both of you. It was the most non-sarcastic or dour he had felt he could be at the time. Maybe he would end up at the bar before the end of the night. Further introductions to the wedding party followed, who seemed to be the only people in the room upon his arrival. The groomsmen all looked like carbon copies of Matthew, with slight tweaks to height or hair color, and the two bridesmaids that were there looked like the men's XX chromosome doppelgangers. Arlene really had escaped her youth and was now firmly entrenched in the land of khakis and wasps, for better or worse. There's one more coming, but she said that she would be a bit late, Arlene informed him. Vic is not the punctual kind of person, and I'll be sure to introduce you when she gets here. She's small, but she's hard to miss. Soon the party started in earnest, and the room filled up with more practically indistinguishable young professionals. A handful of older folks Ethan assumed were Matthew's parents or family, and a whole lot of honesty, joy, and revelry. It was the kind of thing that would make him squirm once upon a time. So many smiles and people without a single care in the world. People who had no idea the things he had seen. The gruesome accidents, the fires, the monstrosities crushing cities and exploding on the populace. Just one world could hold enough horrors to give a person nightmares for a lifetime. Near infinite worlds? Well, Ethan was just happy he had developed a thick skin. And no matter how many mind-fucking grotesqueries he saw, there wasn't likely to be much worse than a room full of smiling, happy people.
Oh my god. So you officially are tackling all of my favorite genres. Maybe not the romance too much, but I can handle this all at once. So, Mr. Mark, congratulations on the reading. Congratulations on the book. That was fabulous. We need to jump in and get started because I have questions. And
yes,
where do we start? Where do we start? You said this is a sequel, book 2. I'm hoping that means there'll be more in this series, but that will be later. I need to know. Give us the background of what this story is for Ethan. Was he always deaf? I mean, he has a sister. Bring us in. What's going on here?
Yeah, so I consider it kind of the second part of a series. I don't make it a solid part 1 and part 2. You can read Death at a Wedding without having read Death Dresses Poorly, and you would probably be caught up okay. But to kind of clarify what was going on in the first one, Ethan was the lone survivor of a plane crash, and it was a crash that he was supposed to die in. And he was then approached by a man who claimed to be Death, who was trying to recruit him to become the new Death. In this world, death is kind of cyclical. And Ethan had just escaped what I kind of alluded to in the reading that I just did. He was in an emotionally abusive relationship with his mother, and he had just broken away from that, and he didn't want anything to do with whatever it was this guy was presumably selling. So the story follows as Ethan and the current Death, the man in black who dresses poorly and mentioned in the title, he's trying to sell him on the idea of being Death and traveling through all these fantastical places and worlds. So without going too much into spoiler territory, how it goes, clearly Ethan ended up accepting the job. I won't say how or why, but now he's kind of lived in that role for a little while. I believe I said it's about 2 years that he's been Death up to this point, so he's fairly well established in the role. And that, just for some context, in this particular world is a very long time for any living creature to die and become Death. Usually it's very, very quick, like a day or two, maybe an hour, maybe just a single action. So the fact that he's been Death for so long kind of plays into the story a little bit.
He is seasoned at Death. I like it.
Yes.
So I'm
Yes.
liking the conversation of where you're bringing him to meet his sister. Probably not the most honest motives on her part, let's just be honest. And this poor child is sitting there in this place that you can tell he is uncomfortable. What made you decide, because you hinted at the beginning that you were going to try romance? Because you're like, I never thought this was going to happen. I need to know how that process worked. And when you decided like, oh, I'm doing this, like this is happening.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting. If you go back years ago, because Death Dresses Poorly came out in 2017, and I had had some conversations and interviews just like this one where I was absolutely adamant that this was it. There is not going to be a sequel. It is a standalone book, and Death Dresses Poorly is very much a personal story in that the Ethan character is kind of me and how I would have reacted at that age, at that time, to that situation. So it is kind of inserting myself in the story a little bit, and also the character of Death. It's the same thing, and I realized that it was a story of a young man who was trying to break away and become his own man after he had been through a lot of things when he was younger. Now, my mother is not an emotionally abusive person. I love my mother. She was a single mom who raised me, and she raised me right. But just that act of breaking away and becoming your own person, which is exactly what I did when I was a little bit younger than Ethan was in the story, and just trying to find your way and the scariness about it. And when I realized that there was another story to tell, I kind of thought, well, what was the next major milestone in my life that changed the direction of things? And it was that I met my eventual wife and fell in love, and I was about the same age that Ethan was when he meets the person in the story, and I realized that that was another kind of milestone moment where a person really learns how to grow up when it's not puppy love, when you realize that this is a real relationship that could go somewhere, when you stare down the barrel of the possibility that you have just met someone who you will spend the rest of your life with, and that thought doesn't scare you. That can be scary. And then that's kind of what I wanted Ethan to tackle this time.
So I'm loving all the different pieces you're bringing into your life into these books and how much you are embracing it. I also appreciate that you're honest enough to say, yeah, 8 years ago I said this was it, and now I'm like, here we are. What's just happened? So, how was that transition of saying from no to now I'm like, oh, I'm here? Like, how did you manage that?
It came about very surprisingly. I like to say that the very first book, although it was the first book that I published, it wasn't the first book that I wrote. I have an epic science fantasy duology, my Catching Hell duology, and I wrote that first. And I wrote that over a period of about 5 years. And it was when I wrote it, and then I'd edit it, and then I'd hack and slash away at it. And then when I was absolutely done with it and I was sick of the characters, that's when I wrote Death Dresses Poorly, because I needed something to completely wipe every part of that from my brain. I needed a brand new creative outlet and put it into something that wasn't this epic science fantasy world. And it took me 6 weeks to write that. And that was 6 weeks to write it and to edit it. It's significantly shorter. So from that, I should have realized that at any one moment, the inspiration can strike for me to write this kind of story. And it was years later, and as I said, I was very happy with it being standalone. And at the start of Death Dresses Poorly is a meeting between Ethan and Death before he knows that he's Death. That actually happened to me. It's almost verbatim a situation that happened to me at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. And it was a very strange encounter. It wasn't like an overly rude or like awkward one. It was just an encounter between a young man and an older fellow dressed all in black, and an awkward conversation that we had about fast food. Although, as I said, it was very natural for us to have it. It was more of a conversation and like how bad fast food is in North America these days. And it was from that story sprung. And then years later, another similar event kind of happened in my life. A similar event in that it left a mark on me. And it was clearly something that should turn into a new story for Ethan. And then that ended up in a roundabout way. I changed a bunch of things because anybody who reads it will understand the sensitive nature of it. It happened again, like it happened as it kind of plays out at the start of this story. And when that happened, and again, I sat on it for about a year and a half, and I'm like, that's another story. There's something more for Ethan to have happen here. And then it evolved into that. And then Death at a Wedding came by, and 4 weeks to write death out of it. So I basically wrote it in a month, just finding the time to do it and plowing through. I knew exactly the story I wanted to tell. I'm very much a pantser, not a plotter, so I just let my fingers fly. And it, yeah. So I think at this point forward, I'm not going to say I'm not going to make more of these stories. I'm just going to say I'm going to wait for the proper inspiration to strike me.
I'm glad that there's a giant shift in terms of understanding that inspiration works mysteriously. So you are embracing it. I'm also very much amazed of how well you can take the small anecdotes that happen and realize, ooh, I can share this. You know, I'm a believer of everything's a learning lesson, and you should master that and explain that beautifully. You have been working on writing for over a decade in all different genres. Do you have a favorite one?
I only say that I prefer genre fiction. When I first kind of started writing, I said science fiction and fantasy, and as I said, my the first story that I wrote is science fantasy, right? It's magic and robots combined, and the epic stories that that can create. But then I had Death Dresses Poorly, which is still a fantasy, but it is very much an urban fantasy, like it's a modern fantasy story, and it was inspired by a lot of modern fantasy stories that I enjoyed reading at the time. And then it kind of turned into this dark comedy. I always thought that I wasn't very good at writing dialogue, and that shows, I think, in my Catching Hell series. And then in Death Dresses Poorly, it's 80% dialogue. It's mostly just the two main characters bantering back and forth at one another and just being snarky and rude to one another. And I really enjoyed that. And then that kind of morphed into something. And so all of this kind of led to the writing of my only self-published book, which is Between Conversations, Tales from the World of Ryujin, which takes place in the same world as my Catching Hell stories, but they're all different genres. So it's a collection of short stories and novelettes that I wrote. They run chronologically through time from the year 1600 to thousands of years in the future. And I wanted to stretch my wings and write all these different genres. So there's a historical fantasy, and there is a young adult kind of story. There is a very dialogue driven, I call it kind of Tarantino-esque. There is a military science fiction. So it's a roundabout way of saying I prefer writing science fiction and fantasy and kind of things therein, but I clearly have some kind of a propensity for writing other stuff. So I think that there's some things that I wouldn't write. I can't see myself writing like an actual historical fiction or something along those lines. Mostly because I'm lazy and I don't want to do the research into a lot of those kinds of things. But I I would have said that I'd never write a romance, and then I kind of did. I did it in a very Mark Watson way, but it is a romance story. It is there's a meet cute, and there is all the early moments of love and what I believe are kind of honest conversations between two people who are just getting to know each other and are facing that possible fear of what the future might hold that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, it's being open to writing a lot of things, and I don't think I'm going to limit myself and say that's all I'm going to write.
I'm so impressed with the fact that you just embrace it. You just kind of take it with it. I'm like, I'm just going to stretch my wings, see what I can do. You also realize what you like and you don't like to do. So I appreciate that a lot. So you've been writing, you don't mind dabbling in different genres, playing around. What are you working on now? What can we expect next coming up from Mr. Mark? What is it?
Pure science fiction. I'd never written like a pure, honest science fiction before. There'd always been some kind of elements of fantasy or those kinds of inspirations that I had originally written in a lot of the stuff that I had done. But I did write, and I finished writing, and now I'm kind of sitting on it a little bit. It's kind of my process. Sometimes is I'll write something, then I'll sit on it and see how I feel about certain aspects, and then I'll go back and edit it. But I do have a pure science fiction manuscript sitting here on my computer, just waiting for me to open it up again. I tend to not write a whole lot in the summer living in Calgary, my summers are very short. I essentially get 2.5 months of decent weather. So I try and take advantage of that as much as I can. And I'd love to not be inside where I am right now, which, as you can see, is a very cozy room, but there are no windows down here, and it's not a great place for me to enjoy the outdoors. So I'll get back to it probably in September or October, I would expect. But yeah, pure science fiction, which again was a surprise. I didn't think that I could do it. That one did take a little bit of scientific research and fudging with the laws of physics a little bit just to make sure that I could write an engaging story. But yeah, that's what's hopefully in the pipeline.
Ooh, super exciting. So for a girl that's in Texas and has about 8 months of summer, I prefer writing in the fall because it's too hot to do anything else, including thinking. So I understand for totally different reasons. So enjoy the summer, all 2 months
Yes.
that you get. So absolutely. So dear, tell me, what advice would you give to an up and coming author that is interested in tackling anything? Like, what would you tell them? Or if you can tell Mark 10 years ago when it comes to writing.
The biggest thing is to not set limits on yourself. I've spoken to so many people in the near decade. Like, I'm coming up on my 10-year anniversary of writing, and in that time, I've been to different events and met with different groups and spoken with a lot of different authors and found a lot of kind of different opinions on what it is I'm about to say. But don't set goals. Don't set like a writing prompt a day kind of thing where you're inspired to, or you're trying to be inspired to write 1,000 words, like, oh, I got to write 1,000 words a day. Or uh, I like to say that you're never going to find a bigger opponent to NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, than me, because I find that that can be a very stressful way of trying to create, and you try to force words out there. And I know that this doesn't apply to everybody, but I did notice very early on that my technique and how I write things wasn't something that was very well kind of advertised to the general writing world. And when I originally went to my very first conference and started talking about, yeah, I just kind of write what I want, and if I don't feel like writing, I don't write, and I don't set goals. I kind of think they're dangerous. It was met with a lot of blowback, and it was at one particular meeting was actually kind of hostile. And I've massaged my message a little bit. I'm not quite as in your face. I've become a bit more of a professional at it, but I'm a big proponent of not setting goals. I'm a big proponent of writing at your own pace and taking your time and making sure that you enjoy what it is that you write. Because a word that you're forced to write, I believe, is a word that someone's going to be forced to read. And we don't want to force people to read. We want to encourage them to read. So that would be my message.
So Mark, you relate so well to my heart because I'm very much with you. Like NaNoWriMo is not my thing. I was like, oh, that sounds painful and horrible in so many different ways. But everybody needs a
Yes.
little motivation. But when it comes to your message, I can completely resonates with me because I am a seasonal writer. Obviously, I'm going to wait to fall to get amazing things done. So I also hate that you had a horrible panel and people were not actually understanding what that means. I'm like, we all write differently. So yes, I love it. Thank you. So, dear, tell us, where can our viewers find you? Where can our listeners learn more about you, about the books? Where are you located?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, as far as my books, all of them are currently on Amazon. So, I have 5 novels that are out there. There's Death Dresses Poorly and Death at a Wedding, my brand new one. There's Catching Hell Part 1 and Part 2, Journey and Destination. So, those are all on Amazon under my publisher, Fluky Fiction. And then I also have Between Conversations, which I mentioned earlier, which is also on Amazon, which I self-publish there. So you can find it on ebook and paperback, all of those, as well as Death Dresses Poorly in audiobook, which is available on Audible, which is something that I recorded myself. So I kind of learned how to record audiobooks, and I have the audiobook for Between Conversations recorded, and I'm mastering it, and then I'm working on Death at a Wedding. As for where you can actually find me, I have a website, markwatson.ca. That's marcwatson.ca. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/markwroteabook, all one word. And you can find me on pretty much every single social media platform other than Facebook at Wright Watson, WRITEWATSON. And I mean all of them. I make it a point to try and claim that moniker on every single site that I can. I do have a YouTube channel where I do some writing instructional videos, mostly for myself more than anybody else. But all those social media platforms you can think of, I am on it and I am active.
Ooh, I love it. I love that you went and claimed all of your social medias. I think that's amazing. I think sometimes people don't, and then everything's a little different. So I appreciate that you did it. So love it. All right, dear. It's been such a pleasure having you. I have such a fun time. I have a list of books. I don't know if all of our viewers and listeners do, but today's been the day that I'm just writing down. I was like, okay, I must get all these books because you guys all write all my favorite genres. So I am loving it. But before you leave us, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, super easy. Do not think too much about this. Let's see how you do. Home cooked
right.
meals or restaurants?
Oh, home cooked.
Nice. Caffeinated drinks or decaf?
Caffeinated drinks, decaffeinated drinks don't make any sense to me.
Me too. Action or comedy?
Comedy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Early bird or night owl?
Yes.
To both?
Very much both of those. Absolutely. I function on very little sleep. I wake up early and I go about as long as I can.
I am so impressed, because I'm definitely not. No. Amazing. So here's a little different. Let's see how you do with this one. If your main character had a theme song, what would it be?
Oh. She Don't Use Jelly by the Flaming Lips.
Okay, do tell.
It's just kind of a quirky alternative song from the 90s. I don't think it necessarily pertains to him specifically, but when I think of like the emotions that the stories that he goes through kind of evokes in me, and when you ask that question, not knowing at all that it was coming, in all honesty, that was the first one that came to mind, and I was perfectly okay with that. And I kind of like, yeah, I kind of get that like awkward alternative living on the fringes of society kind of vibe from that song, and that's definitely what Ethan is.
I love it. Awesome. Dear, it has been truly a pleasure having you on the podcast. And yes, you do have the voice for audiobook narrating. So congratulations. Keep
Thank
it
you.
up. Do you have any closing remarks for us?
The only thing I ever close with is the same thing I always close with, and that is whatever it means to you, please be a hero.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Congratulations, dear. To our viewers, go ahead, check out Mr. Mark's website. Make sure you follow. Check out these books, Urban Fantasy at its greatest. You don't want to miss out. Remember, if you're new to the podcast, make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss a single episode. We have talented authors joining us all the time with incredible books, so we are excited you guys are joining us. And we'll be back next week with more authors. So make sure to follow us along, and I'll see you guys again next week. Bye.